Welcome everyone to the latest episode of Purposely. Today I have Jason Duncan, the real Jason Duncan, all the way from Nashville, Tennessee in the United States. Welcome.
It is such a pleasure to be here. And I heard just a small bit of Southern accent. And when you said Nashville, Tennessee, I don't know if you were doing that on purpose, but you could almost be Nashvilleian the way you said that. That was good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I didn't mean it, but when you say Nashville, Tennessee, you kind of just got to say it like that, right? So welcome. We have been following each other on Instagram for a while. That's how we met, which is why I love Instagram.
Yes.
And today we're going to hear all about what you do over in the United States. But first of all, I ask people the same question every episode. Everyone's used to it now, but by now who's listening. So if you rock up to a barbecue, you barbecue in Nashville, Tennessee?
We do.
Yep. So if you rock up to a barbecue and you meet someone new and they say, "G'day, Jason," that's what we say in Australia, "G'day." Or they'll probably say, "How you going?" or "How you doing?" What do you do? How do you explain to people what you do?
Well, I love that question, that the one that you asked me about that, because that is a question that I think it's a human experience. We all get asked that question all the time, especially, of course, from people you don't know and places that you've not met them before. And so when I get that question these days, the way I answer that is I say, I teach entrepreneurs how to build, scale, and enjoy their businesses.
Cool. Well, there's a lot of entrepreneurs who come on this show and a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to this show. So I can't wait to hear about how you do that. But before we go there, let's hear about the story behind the story. Let's go way back to you growing up in America and tell us, what your childhood was like, how that shaped what you're doing now. Tell us about the journey.
Well, when I was a kid, my dad drove a Volkswagen Beetle, and I think everybody knows what those look like. With those, are we back? We good?
Sorry, I just tried to put it on you, and I put it on myself. So I was just trying to give you the spotlight, but it didn't work. Anyway, that's all right. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Well, that's all right. So my dad drove a Volkswagen Beetle when I was a kid. I've got a picture of me standing in the front seat of his orange Beetle with me holding the steering wheel. And I developed an affinity for cars really early, and I wanted to design cars for a living because all I did as a kid was draw cars all the time. And I've also grew up in a family of followers of Jesus, and so the church life and going to church camp was always part of my experience. And I remember it was the summer between my junior and senior year in high school. I had been accepted to 2 art colleges here in the United States. In the industrial design departments, that's where you would go as an artist to learn how to design cars or other machinery. And I'd gotten accepted, and I'm a camp counselor at church camp. And as it was during the summer, all the counselors would go out after all the kids went back to their dorms and went to bed. We'd sit out in the field and we'd just lay on our backs and look at the stars and talk. And yes, as teenage counselors would do at church camp. And I remember having such a feeling overcome me, was like, this is the feeling that I want to have for the rest of my life. I want to impact people's lives. Designing cars would be cool. And it would be nice to move to Germany and design for Volkswagen or Porsche or work at GM factory and, their headquarters here in Detroit in the United States. But I thought, I want to do something that I can teach and impact other people. And that was really the shift, that moment lying on my back, looking at the stars when I was 17 years old. I made that decision. I'm not going to go to art school, even after I'd spent years preparing for that. And I decided to go to a private Christian college. I got a degree in youth ministry and started in youth ministry because that was my experience. And I spent the next 13 years doing ministry vocationally, but I did it bivocationally, which means I had another job for most of that time. And so that's that's what I did for 13 years. And that other job that I had was in sales. I was selling health and life insurance to small business owners. So there's where I really cut my teeth on learning how to sell to people. And in the midst of all that, we were talking pre-show. In the midst of all that, my wife and I, we met on a blind date when we were 16 and 15. And dated for 4 years and ended up getting married at 20 and 19. And we just celebrated our 26th wedding anniversary. So we've been together a long time, and that's part of my life. My wife jokes that we raised each other. And so we've got two kids. Our son will be 21 next week, and then our daughter's 18. She's a freshman in college. But that's where my career started, was in ministry and in sales. And of course it's diverged a few times since then. And I'll be happy to share any portions of that story that you're interested in hearing about.
Well, I love that. How lucky were you that you had that kind of epiphany when you're 17? Because I feel like a lot of young people go to college, or we call it university here. It's a bit different how it works in the States, but you feel this pressure to follow the traditional route that your parents want you to go down. And a lot of young people here go to college or uni and study things that they don't really have a passion or interest for.
Yeah.
But how lucky were you that you realized, well, hey, this is my passion, helping people and making an impact. And then you changed your trajectory. So what do you think led to that epiphany? Was it just luck, or was it a process? Were you talking to someone? Like, how do people tap into that intuition?
I think it's about like anything else. Success as an entrepreneur can be boiled down to 5 keys. It's part of what I talk about on my podcast. And when I'm coaching people, I talk about the 5 keys to success. And one of those is knowing the right people, and being at the right place at the right time is another one. And I think that for me, the influence that I had of being very involved in youth group in a healthy environment. And I know a lot of religious environments are not healthy, and there's certainly a lot can be said about that. But I think that environment that I was in was very healthy. The experiences that I had at retreats and to the camp was formative. And I remember being at a retreat one weekend. It might have been the summer or the fall prior to that summer. And there was a group that had come in. I don't even remember their name, but part of what they were talking about was how we can be an influence for Christ in our schools and how we could do that. And I don't know, I think that all of that just kind of, everything that you experience, the people you experience, the places you go, the things you see, the things you do, all form who you're going to be. And I think that for me, I don't think luck really had anything to do with it as much as it was just being at the right place at the right time and being around the right kind of people. And that set my life in a completely different direction than I had anticipated. I thought I'm going to go to college and play baseball, or I'm going to go to college and design cars. I had all these other ideas. And yet at the end of the day, I went to university and decided I'm going to dedicate at least what I thought was going to be the rest of my life to ministry. And of course, that didn't last. It did last to 13 years, but it didn't last forever.
And so what made you decide to leave the ministry? And I mean, I don't even know what that means. I am kind of religious. My mum was Church of England, so I went to a Sunday school, but by grade 6, I stopped going to church really. So what does that mean, like working in the ministry? Like, were you a pastor? Tell us about that. I find it very fascinating.
Yeah. So yeah, in the terms that I think most people would understand, the terms that you use, the Church of England, just a different version of what I experienced in my church experience, probably. But I was a pastor for 13 years, leading a congregation. For about half of that time, I was leading the youth of the congregation. Doing the things I did as a kid, taking them to church camp, going on mission trips, and doing vacation Bible schools in the summer, and those types of things, and teaching classes and helping kids deal with the things that teenagers deal with on a regular basis, and trying to make sense of that. And then the second half of my ministry career was I was what would be referred to as most people would understand, the preacher or the senior minister or senior pastor, where I was actually preaching every Sunday and leading the congregation. And for me, it actually happened. The story, the beginning of the end of my pastoral career was when if your listeners will remember, when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans back in 2005. So it's been 16 years ago. But when it hit, I used to work at a church in the area of New Orleans. It wasn't in New Orleans, about an hour north of New Orleans, but they were affected by the hurricane. And so at the time I was pastoring a church here locally, and I called my friends that I knew down in the New Orleans area and said, "Hey, what are you guys okay? What can we do to help?" And they said, "Man, we need a lot of help." So I loaded up a van. There were 16 or 17 adults and a few teenagers, and we took off. It's a 9-hour drive from Nashville down to New Orleans, and we spent a week working. But it was at that week of working at Katrina, the Katrina relief, that something clicked again. It was like, wait a minute, like this isn't my experience, not what I was doing at Katrina, but my experience in pastoral ministry wasn't meeting what I remembered that I wanted to do when I was 17. I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to change lives. And what I was, my experience was I was babysitting a lot of people who knew better and they should do better, and they weren't. They would come and they would sit in the pew and they would listen to me talk, and they go, "Okay, that was great, preacher," and then they would leave and go back to their lives, and they weren't really any different than anybody else. And so I started on that 9-hour drive back from New Orleans. I made a decision that I was leaving. I was leaving the institutional church. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how that was going to work out. But when I got back, this is what's so cool, is that everything came back full circle, because when I got back, I was praying very diligently, like how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to go to the next step? What does this mean? And it became clear to me that I was going to go get my master's in education and teach school. I didn't know how I was going to do that. But I started making phone calls, and within 2 weeks, I was accepted and started a master's program and had all of the money donated to me to go, because people believed in my story, and they're like, "You can go." And I spent 18 months doing that program to teach to get my teaching certificate, my master's in education, and then I started teaching school. And I thought, just like I thought in ministry, I thought I would be doing that for the rest of my life. And of course, again, it didn't last, but I did it. I was a school teacher for 4 years. I taught 8th grade American history, something I'm sure you Australians know a whole lot about. But I taught 8th grade American history, and it was the best thing I'd ever done. It was so fulfilling. Those kids, I loved it. I had 13 and 14-year-old kids all day long, and it was just, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I was really, really good at my craft.
Yep. And then what happened? How did you start your own entrepreneurial journey? Like, when did you decide, hey, I'm going to leave the security of a 9-to-5 job? Well, teaching's kind of a 9-to-5 job, in the traditional sense. So when did you start thinking, hang on, there's more, I can impact more people, and you made that shift to being an entrepreneur and working for yourself?
Well, that was a bad day. It was in April of 2011. My principal came to me and he said, "Hey, Jason, we need to talk." And of course, here's what I knew. So I knew at that moment that I was the '1 teacher in the county in my subject area. I was a model teacher. Other teachers came and observed me. Like the principal liked me. It was good. But here's what else I knew. I knew that I did not have tenure. I was the last guy hired in the building. They were struggling right then because of money. Because the Great Recession here in the United States, when that happened in 08, 09, the big meltdown. But it was in 10 and 11 that the ripples started hitting school systems. Now, back up 1 year from that fateful April 2011 day, 1 year prior to that, in March of 2010, I started what turned out to be my largest company yet, but I didn't know it.
I need to interrupt you. My dog is doing something very naughty. I've got a puppy. And I can hear her. Just wait 1 second. Hey, what are you doing? Come here.
This is great. This is live. You can't contrive this. This is
on your bed, please. On your bed. You might see her. No, she's going to skulk through. Get on your bed. She's 6 months old, and she is. Every podcast I do, she does something naughty, barks.
That's awesome.
Sorry about that. So it sounds like you were the last in, and sometimes the first out.
That's exactly what happened. And, he was very apologetic. Yeah, but there was not, his hands were tied because of the rules, the law, the government here in the States was, that's how they hired teachers and that's how they kept teachers. But 1 year prior to that, I had started a company called Future Vision Energy, and I still own that company today. It is the largest company in my portfolio. I own 8. It is still the largest company. It is the company that I exited without exiting, which I can tell about that later if you want to know. But I started that company with a friend a year prior, just on a whim, and like, this will be fun. And we were doing hydrogen and ethanol. Nothing. I didn't know anything about it, but I was good at sales. And my business partner who was in there, he said, you need to come in and help me with this. And so we had started the business, and we had been playing around with it for a year with no intention of it ever providing any kind of cash flow at all. And then in April of 2011, when I found out that I wasn't going to be able to come back the following school year, I had a decision to make. And I made the decision that I was going to take that company, which was called Future Vision Energy. Today, it is rebranded as Energy Lighting Services, which is a company based in Nashville. But we rebranded the company later. But I decided I'm going to do this company, and I'm going to turn it into an energy efficiency company rather than energy creation. And I gave myself a deadline of August the 15th of that year, because that was the last paycheck I was getting from the state. And I thought, well, if I can't make it work, I told my wife, I'll go get a job at Starbucks or Home Depot or something. And on August the 12th, I went up and made a pitch to a large regional hospital for an LED lighting retrofit, and we won the contract. It turned out to be $2.3 million.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't get all that money at once, but that kind of propelled me into entrepreneurialism. I was an accidental entrepreneur. I experienced some success early, but it wasn't as easy as that story makes it sound.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure there was a lot of work and sleepless nights and all the things that we experience. And so what's your real passion though? Because I feel like, watching you on Instagram, and you're obviously really passionate about sales, because you're really good at sales. Your sales tips are awesome. I love it when you share those, because I love sales too. So any kind of, knowledge or tips that I can get from other people, I'm always like, yes. But you've also got this school for entrepreneurs. So you've got it's kind of like a university, from what I can tell, where entrepreneurs can tap into your knowledge and your experience and your success factors. So what gets you really excited today?
I truly believe that entrepreneurs are the ones who change the world. And to that end, I want to see 1,000 entrepreneurs start 1,000 businesses. I want to see 1,000 entrepreneurs learn how to exit their businesses successfully, because I believe that in so doing that, you and I get to experience great things like this. I mean, Facebook is an entrepreneur created concept. YouTube is an entrepreneur concept. The clothes that we're wearing, an entrepreneur decided to do that. I mean, the wall here in my office, everything around us, the computer screens, the phones that we're watching this on, entrepreneurs were behind that, and entrepreneurs can change the world. And if we help them create businesses, to build them, to scale them, and to really enjoy them, that's what I'm passionate about, because I'm a teacher at heart, and I'm also a pastor at heart, and I want to see people just like who are listening to this build those businesses, scale those businesses, and enjoy them, and then figure out how to exit them if they so choose, in a way that they actually don't have to sell it to a third party. That's what I did with my energy lighting services company. I figured out how to structure it correctly, where I still get paid 100%, and I don't have any duties, and it will continue to pay me for a long period of time. And then I get to go out and create Results University, and I do coaching, and I do events, and I get to follow my true passion.
I love it. You're living the dream, mate. So how do people set up their business so that they can exit it? It's a very broad topic, but that's, everyone gets to the point within their business where they don't want it to be about them anymore, because a lot of entrepreneurs start their business and it's all about them, and if they're not there, everything falls apart. Like, how do you do that? Like, what's your advice for people who are at that point in their entrepreneurial journey where they don't want to be working, 60 hours a week, and they don't want to be selling their time for money? What are the levers?
Yeah, well, and I appreciate the question, and certainly there's a lot to that. I'll give a very quick rundown of the 4 things that I teach people how to do to get ready to exit. But I would say this, just to echo your question, is that so the irony of entrepreneurialism is that most entrepreneurs start their businesses because they want freedom. They want freedom of time and freedom of money, and they want to be in charge of their own schedules. But what turns out is they end up being a slave to their business. They're there 50, 60, 70 hours a week. They're the best salesperson. They're the best technician. They're the best bookkeeper. They're the best administrator. And they're right. They are the best. But the fact is, if you continue to maintain being the best, if you've got this hero syndrome, you want to be the hero of your business, you're never going to exit. And you know what you call a building with no exits? That's a dungeon. And what happens in dungeons is you get tortured. And so many entrepreneurs are tortured by their businesses, and they don't know that there's a way out. So oftentimes when I'm sitting across the table, a dinner table, or smoking a cigar with somebody or drinking a glass of bourbon, and I say, this is what I do. I show people how to exit without exiting. They don't even know what that means. They're like, can I do that? Yeah, there's 4 ways. And again, I don't have time to get into it today, but the first thing is I teach this thing called margin theory. And it essentially states that your power, your ability to do things is limited. The load, in other words, the stuff you have to do, is unlimited. And you, as the owner of the business, have to manage that power and load ratio. You've got to always make sure you have more power than you do load. That gives you margin in life. That's where the margin theory comes from. That actually is not, I didn't originate that theory. It came in the 1960s with a guy named Howard Yale McCluskey, but he was doing it as a study on elderly people. And when I read it, when I was working on my PhD, I thought, wait a minute, this has tremendous business applications. So I've kind of taken it as my own. And I really believe that if entrepreneurs understand that theory of margin first and understand, okay, I've got to get rid of stuff as fast as possible the right way in order to have the margin in my life to exit. So that's step 1. Step 2 is something called the law of open cycles. And the law of open cycles is really about task and stress management. And the law of open cycles says that the human stress condition isn't experienced because of stressful situations, but it's experienced because of too many open cycles at any one time. So, me having to be on your podcast, you having to do this podcast, those are open cycles. Me having to answer emails or a text message or send a check to the bank or to pay my bills. Those are all tiny little open cycles. You add all those up, and that's when stress happens. And so any of us can handle one large, big thing as long as that's the only thing we've got. As an entrepreneur, if you understand the law of open cycles and you manage your open cycles correctly, you are preparing yourself to exit quicker. The third thing is called the 20-point system. So if you put together a system where you can analyze deals and opportunities quickly without spending days and hours agonizing over them, then you will only work on deals that are actually going to close as opposed to working on deals that you're going to be chasing your tail. You got to learn to lose early. And so I work with my clients and my students to develop their own unique 20-point system, which essentially says any opportunity presented to you, there's a way that you can score it. If it doesn't hit 20 points, you got to walk away. You got to walk away. You got to lose early. You don't want to lose late. And then the fourth and final is invest in people. Your people are the most important asset. They're the most important things ever. I mean, they're the only things that move from this life to the next. So you've got to invest in people through a results-oriented process and systems that make sure that they can take over when you're not there. And you got to trust them to do that. And that's how I was able to exit without exiting, where I can still continue to receive my salary or income from the business that I created over a decade ago. And now I get to go do things like this and talk to you. I love it.
Wow, I love that. That is really cool. I've just learned something myself. I mean, I've had my business for 11 years, and, there was a long period of time for me to start thinking about replacing myself, and I was a slave to my business, and I've been there. And, part of the dream was moving down here and removing myself from the actual doing. But yeah, I love that 20-point system, because I think that a lot of business owners, when they start out, they don't want to say no to anything. Like they want to win every opportunity, but you have to learn to walk away from crappy deals that aren't going to make you money.
That's right.
And in my business at the beginning, I definitely said yes to everything, and I think you kind of have to learn through that. But now, if I'm not an expert or that's not what we do, I very quickly say, no, we don't do that. That's not what we do, and I refer them on. Because if I did do it, I would waste an enormous amount of time and money creating it from scratch, because it's not what we do, and then I'd make no money, and it'd be very stressful for everybody in my business. So yeah, but I'd love to hear more about this 20-point system. It sounds super cool. And so let's talk about your results school. I can't remember exactly what
Results University. Yeah.
Results University. I love it. Because I personally believe that the education system is flawed. I mean, in Australia, it definitely is. It hasn't evolved over the last 100 years. And I feel like we're teaching young people from an education perspective the wrong things. Like what we need to be teaching them is how to be good with money, how to manage their finances. We need to teach them life skills, like how to be a good person in the world, and how to be accountable. And we need to teach them about business, like how to start businesses, how to create this entrepreneurial thinking from a very young age. And I feel like what we teach them is, I know that American history is really interesting, but is it useful, and is everybody passionate about learning about American history? Like, is that what kids need? Like, I understand we need to teach them how to think, but what do you think are the most important things for teaching the youth of today and young people? And what is your university about? Like, who is it targeted at?
So I agree with you in terms of our education system is broken. There are so many things that we're focusing on that are worthless. I was writing a script for a video that I'm going to be doing in a couple of weeks called Worthless Pursuits, and how entrepreneurs get caught up in worthless pursuits. But our education system, we have a worthless pursuit where when I taught school, and I taught American history, and in the state of Tennessee where I live, there were 11 pages of standards that that my students were going to be held to at the end of the year. They had to take a standardized test. And if you go through and list and read that list of 11 pages of standards, that most of that was worthless. Like there's only 4 or 5 dates that an American history or a student in the United States would need to know. 1776, right? That's when we got our independence from Great Britain. I mean, there are certain dates that you need to know, but beyond that, do you really need to know when the French and Indian War happened? No, as long as you know what happened before the Civil War, like those are critical thinking skills that they need to be taught. And I agree with you, Emily. I think that our education system is flawed, and it also it's flawed in a lot of ways. And I'm a walking example of that flaw, because I was the best teacher in my subject area, yet the decision they made was, you got to go. And what's worse about that is there were a few teachers in that building that word on the street, and I can't confirm this, but word on the street was that the principal had been trying to get these people to leave a long time, and he couldn't get it. He couldn't do anything about it. And here he is, he's got to let 2 people go, and he goes to the number 1 teacher in his subject area to do that. So yeah, our education system is flawed in so many ways. So with Results University, I started this university designed specifically for entrepreneurs to learn how to start, to scale, to enjoy, and to exit their businesses. And the first course that everyone is invited to take is called the Complete Startup Guide for Entrepreneurs. It's 11 lessons. It's everything they need to know, soup to nuts, from starting, setting your vision, filing your LLC paperwork, which I realize is probably uniquely American, but there are certainly ways that it applies in every country around the world. But to get your legal paperwork, to do your operating agreement between you and your partners, if you have them, how you set up your sales systems. I actually talk about the 20-point system in that first course and how to do these things. And so it's designed to give someone everything they need to know to get going. And that's the first course. And then beyond that, what I do every month is I do a video very similar to this for all the students in Results University. can log in, and I do an Ask Jason Live, and I do 60 minutes where it's just simply Q&A. What questions do you have about entrepreneurialism? What can I help you work through? And so it's kind of like coaching, but you're not having to pay coaching rates because I would be very expensive if you hired me one-on-one, but you get me in that setting once a month. And then the second thing I do for Results University students, I do a video called it's a master class on a certain topic. So I'll post the topic and say, hey, this month I'm going to be talking about how to arrange your bookkeeping method so that you don't have to do books by yourself. And I may do an hour-long talk on that. I don't really do Q&A, but it's more of a lecture, but it's live for all students. And then the third thing I do is I get people like you, and who knows, you might be a guest on this, as I do a 90-minute entrepreneur expert series where I bring in another entrepreneur or someone who serves the entrepreneurial community who's an expert in their area. Like, for instance, you're expert in HR. That's kind of your thing, right? And I would kind of, it's almost like a live podcast like what we're doing now. And I would interview him or her about, okay, how does an entrepreneur apply this in his or her business? So the Results University students get those 3 videos every month. Plus, as the world gets back open, we're going to be doing more live events, and we'll do it at luxurious resorts. We'll invite people in, and we'll do live, and I'll invite other speakers to come in and other people. And then I will be releasing more and more courses on, margin theory and the law of open cycles, and more about the 20-point system, really designed to help entrepreneurs figure out how to, build, scale, enjoy, and then exit their business.
I love it. It sounds so cool. And it's definitely what I think young entrepreneurs need. There's a real gap in the education system for people who want to study entrepreneurship. Like, there's courses about entrepreneurship, but I think it's very academic and theory based. It's not practical. So what you're talking about sounds super practical and pragmatic, which is what entrepreneurs need, right? Is they don't need the theory, they need the how.
Yeah.
Like,
well, there's so many Instagram gurus who've never built a damn thing. Like, there's these people on Instagram, they pretend they're talking in front of 50 people or 100 people, and they're really standing in a room by themselves, and a guy with a camera, and they're trying to make it look like they're really something. And I could teach you how to start a business. Well, what have you done? What have you started? Like, what did you build? Did you build anything? Did you start any? Have you failed? What entrepreneurs need, they need a good guide. They need a good mentor. They need somebody like you who's gone through it, who's spent 11 years figuring this stuff out. Like, how did you do it? What did you do wrong? How can I skip this? So these are things that I think are really important. And I know, Emily, you and I agree on those things wholeheartedly.
I love it. So if people want to learn more about you and perhaps sign up for your course, can people in Australia, we've got listeners all over the world, but primarily they're in Australia. Could they sign up to your course and get involved? Like, what's the go?
Yeah, absolutely. So you could go to resultsuniversity.org. That's resultsuniversity.org. And you can enroll in that startup course right now. It's $497 US. And it's 11 lessons, plus there's a bonus lesson I throw in and an ebook that you get 10 downloadable documents. And admittedly so, the legal documents are geared towards United States law, but it'll give you the push in the right direction for how you get your documents set up. And then also there's access to, if you become a student at Results University, because you can buy the course and not be a student, but you can buy the course to get access to the university. And then you can get involved in those 3 Zoom sessions that I do on a recurring monthly basis. But besides that, just getting in touch with me, you can go to therealjasonduncan.com, and there's all the information about me and kind of my universe and what I do with coaching. And I do group coaching sessions, I do one-on-one, et cetera. But if people want to do the course, it's a really easy way to get everything you need to get started.
I love it. And you should definitely follow Jason on Instagram because he posts really cool content all the time. He's very active and he gives away heaps of free value. And he's got a really cool accent.
I was thinking the same thing about you.
I've got an Australian accent. Do I sound like Steve Irwin, or, I don't know if did you ever see Steve Irwin, or were you familiar with him?
Absolutely. And you know what's sad about Steve is I was a big fan, and the year that I was doing my student teaching, was the year that that came on the news that morning in our class that he had passed away, and I was so sad. But yes, I was a big Steve Irwin fan.
Yeah, no, he was amazing, and he's left a pretty big legacy behind. His daughter and his wife has kind of carried it all on, and you should come out here and check it out. But thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I've loved listening to your story, but also there's been some great advice in there for young entrepreneurs or old entrepreneurs. They don't have to all be young. So thank you so much for taking the time all the way from the US. So how is, just to finish on one last question, what is it like in the US now from a COVID perspective? I mean, we've been extremely lucky in Australia. In Melbourne, we've just had another outbreak, and they've just imposed some more restrictions. I'm not there anymore, but I mean, we've had 9 cases, Jason, and they've put all of these restrictions on the community, which must seem so crazy in comparison to like the numbers that you're experiencing there. And what's going on?
Well, here where we live in Nashville and in Tennessee, we're like, things are normal. Like there's a few people still wearing masks. Of course, the vaccinations are being pushed big time, and everybody's talking about it. But everything's 100% back to pre-COVID status. All concerts are going to start back this summer. We actually. There's a friend of mine who's a musician. He went and played down on Broadway, which is if you've ever seen Nashville, the pictures of Nashville, the Broadways where all the honky tonks are. He played down there last week. They're back to full capacity. Normal sporting events are back. Now that's here in Tennessee. Now, the United States is a big country, so there are pockets that's still not true. Michigan's still shut down pretty badly. New York is still shut down. California is still shut down, but California is going to be lifting their mask mandate on June the 15th. So just in a couple of weeks, and that there's a lot of pent up demand ready to kind of get back to normal. But thank God, I'm very lucky to be here in the Nashville area where we're really back to normal. I'm traveling. My wife and I went to Jamaica it was a week before last. We're going on a motorcycle ride this weekend with some friends, and we're going down to Florida in a few weeks after that. So like, we're traveling, everything's kind of normal. Canada is a little nuts right now. I've heard lots about Australia being a little crazy, but I'm lucky to be where I am, and everything seems to be returning back to normal.
Well, that's great. That's great news, because it was pretty intense for a while what was going on. So it's an interesting time to be alive.
Indeed. And just blessed to be alive. I had my first business coach that I ever hired passed away in November, and he had COVID. I don't know that he passed away of COVID, but he had COVID when he passed away, and it was very, very sad. But we press on, we keep going, and we're going to do it for everybody else that's still here. That's right. Well, we might leave it there. Thank you so much. We hope to speak again one day. And if you want to check Jason out, we will share all his handles when we publish the episode. But thanks for listening. Well, thank you, Emily.